So when I first started playing D&D back in the 70s, my friends and I always homebrewed our own campaigns because, aside from the box set of rules, there were no, modules or campaign settings. And then when the modules came out, we basically repurposed the maps, but we didn't really use them much because we had all read them, we knew all the secrets and whatnot. But in reading those modules and in using those classic old blue maps, we learned a lot about map making and about designing adventures, designing campaigns, and what we learned from the masters, Gygax and Arneson and those guys. Now today, of course, you really don't need to repurpose maps from modules because the map making tools out there are such that you can really create some high quality maps on your own. And even if you don't want to run modules or campaign settings or whatever, the lessons that we learned back then are still applicable today. In fact, there's such a wealth of material out there and so many great designers that you can really pick up some great tips just by reading this from a standpoint of, well, why did they create this from a rules sense or a game mechanic sense? So today I'm going to do just that with the Dungeon of the Mad Mage. Hello again, folks. KR King here, helping you homebrew your own D&D campaign. So today I'm going to be looking at the Dungeon of the Mad Mage, which is in Waterdeep, in the Undermountain beneath it. This is derived from the Forgotten Realms campaign setting, which is over 30 years old. And this campaign setting has run through multiple D&D editions, and there's a huge history, not just to Waterdeep, but the entire area. And I'm not going to go into that history per se. I'm going to be looking at the Dungeon of the Mad Mage module in terms of analyzing how it's set up, how it's configured at the beginning to give you as a GM tips on how to create your own dungeons. Because you can learn so much about how to, create adversaries, create allies, how you can justify why creatures are all living in this underground labyrinth, why it is so large and whatnot. The lessons are there. And also lessons in terms of creating some variables, some game mechanics in the construction of this dungeon itself that really add to the gameplay. So let's get started. So the first thing the designers do is they give a history of this dungeon. Halaster, the Mad Wizard, over 1,000 years old. He's sort of immortal, as we'll find out. He has created this series of labyrinths, dungeon complexes and whatnot on this area called the Undermountain, which is beneath the city of Waterdeep. And the history states that the elves had at one time had their ancient capital city here thousands of years before. And this, as we'll see, relates to some of the qualities of this dungeon complex. But basically they give you Halaster first because he is the big bad villain of the complex. And even though, at the first, second, or whatever levels you would think, well, no low-level characters are going to run into Halaster, they make him interesting in that he is actually going to have some interactions with the players. And why is that? Because like all good villains, Halaster's motives are complex and inscrutable. And the designers give some sample goals that Halaster might have. Halaster's going to have interactions with the players because like most villains, they got to where they got by not risking life and limb themselves, by getting others to do it for them. And the other thing about a really good villain has a twisted sense of humor. They appear before the players either as themselves or in some other form. They're constantly sort of mocking them and trying to get under their skin. They're also delighting in their failures and then sometimes, extending some grudging admiration when the players succeed. And what the point is here is that you want your players to develop a relationship and maybe not just purely antagonistic with the big bad villain before they're at the level where they're really ready to take him on. So look at how they talk about Halaster, how, they mention how he develops. Think about that in terms of your villain. Now, of course, this uneven, player-villain relationship, is somewhat softened by, Halaster's desire to observe the players and mock them. But it's also balanced in that they give Halaster an arch enemy. And again, the pronunciation, Jazeera Kestelharp, I guess, who she was one of the apprentices that he took thousands of years ago to help him, build his underground empire. She at some point realizes he was insane. She tried to escape. He imprisoned her. And in the process of her escaping, she forego her corporeal form and now lives in the stonework of Undermountain itself. And it's really interesting, this non-corporeal form that the designers have chosen for Jazeera, because it allows her to have certain game functions. You know, she wants to take control of the Undermountain away from Hallister, so she sees adventurers as potential allies in that process. And so if they're going to get in trouble or whatever, she will often warn them. And the thing is, being non-corporeal or whatnot, being, you know, everywhere at once, she can appear to the players as they move through to give them warnings if they're going, you know, in the wrong direction or they're about to get killed. She can provide clues, anything you want. And she also prevents players from using gates that Hallister has set up to move, you know, from level 1 to level 10. She's put magic spells on these, again, never really explained, but she does it so that you have to be 11th level. Why? Because, you know, you don't want players going to places that are just going to get killed. You know, they can still try to work their way down the conventional stairs and whatnot. But again, Jazeera is going to give them fair warning, you know, don't go there, don't do that, you're about to get killed. And then if they ignore it, well, they get what they deserve. But the thing is that there's a compelling and logical reason. One, that Jazeera is, you know, incorporeal in all the stonework, trying to get away from Hallister. And two, why she would warn the players or set things up such that they have to be of a certain level, because she wants to overthrow Hallister. Give your arch enemy to your villain, you know, desires and motivations that make sense and that coordinate themselves into the gameplay. Now, another very interesting thing that the designers have worked into the history of the Undermountain is this knot in the weave concept. And this is an after effect of this tremendously powerful, you know, unexplained spell that the elves put on this area when they wanted to remove all traces of their ancient capital. And again, the history of this, you know, in terms of just running in this dungeon isn't that critical. Nor, you know, what this spell exactly is. But what it does is it gives this overall magical effect on the Undermountain. What it does to many people who come here is it creates this sort of obsessive insanity in which they want to stay here. Hallister and some of his apprentices had this, you know, obsession. And this is really good because it also creates an answer if players have that age-old dungeon question, why are there all these monsters being drawn here? Why are they living here? Because of the after effects of this spell. So you got a great story and it helps game mechanics. All right, so another critical, you know, aspect of dungeon design is how do people get inside? Do you have one entrance or do you have multiple entrances? Is the entrance heavily guarded? It's, you know, in a keep or something. Is it a lost entrance that, you know, the players just discover? You can also have dungeons that are totally sealed from any kind of conventional access. You have to have a teleport circle and obviously have some information about this place underground in order to use it. So in terms of Hallister's dungeon, when the players first come into this module, the opening is this well 40 feet wide in this tavern called the Yawning Portal that was built on the ruins of Hallister's Tower. So obviously the Yawning Portal as a tavern is a gathering place for adventurers, many of whom want to go down into the Undermountain, explore. The owner charges any adventurer 1 gold piece to get on this pulley system. He lowers them into the first level, and he charges them to get out. They have to pay first. So in terms of game mechanics, it's a simple method. You know, they give you, you know, a DC of 15 if you want to try to climb up the sides of the well. It also provides a gathering place for adventurers. And then, you know, being a tavern, being filled with adventurers, provides an entry for the GM to give the players potential quests, you know, reasons. Someone hires them basically to go down into the Undermountain. And they divide these with starting quests and future quests. So a starting quest, anybody can just walk into the Yawning Portal without any knowledge or experience and be asked to do something. A future quest means you have had to have some information which is usually obtained down in the dungeon such that you can then go to the next level. And they give you 4 examples both of a starting quest and a future quest, and they show you the levels at which they feel the players would be ready for this. And this can give you ideas when you read these about what would motivate people to hire adventurers, you know, to go down into a dungeon. You know, the most basic reason which is given in one of these starting quests is I just want treasure and magic. You know, I want a percentage of it. But there's other classic ones, you know, rescuing a noble who's disappeared, you know, searching for a lost artifact, or just, you know, getting money to repay a debt. And what these quests do is it then gives your players a special place in the world. Not only do they have, you know, a relationship with someone that they've done this for, but they gain renown in the world as adventurers worth hiring, which then leads to the future quests. People recognize this, they've gone up in level, now they can do some more difficult thing, or they found out information in the dungeon itself that makes them special in terms of being able to go to the next level. Now the Yawning Portal also contains something else, which is secrets. If the players spend 4 hours or more just hanging around there, you have the secrets deck, which is in the appendix of the module. And there are different, rumors or, secrets, things people are hearing about activities, in Waterdeep or in the Undermountain itself. There's nothing per se that the players can act upon. No one's asking them to do anything, but it gives them information, maybe an area to explore, maybe something to look at. Think about these adventure hooks in your own campaign. There's nothing better than when the players just hear something, we've heard about strange activity at the wharf, but I don't really know, and then we'll see what they do. Maybe they go to the wharf, maybe not. Maybe there's some person they've heard about. It also makes your world seem real. Things are going on. People are moving back and forth, coming into town or whatnot. And the thing is, people do gossip. They do talk about things, especially anything of interest. The other thing is with these secrets decks or any kind of rumors, it gives the players a leg up on other NPCs or whatnot that are competing for the same sort of, treasure, magic, whatever. Now there's another thing, the designers have added a magic alteration effect, instituted by Halaster and his tremendous power, which serves some pretty clear game mechanics. You can't use any kind of, magical spell to move from one level to the other, right? The only thing you can use is a wish. Thing is, this is used to prevent a player from, after they've been in the dungeon and they've gone down to the 10th level, they come back, they're in the Yawning Portal, and they teleport themselves down to the 10th level. Oh, no, no, no. You've got to use the various gates or conventional methods, and as we'll see with the gates, that can be deadly. The other thing this explains is those pesky questions that players may have about why aren't NPCs just teleporting down to the lower levels or getting treasure or teleporting things back out. It's a really interesting device that you can use in your own practice in terms of, look, you can't teleport it here up and down, here's why, and that's the way it is. So in terms of describing the dungeon itself, the designers do a number of things that, again, is really good practice in terms of, having a quick solution to, sizes of corridors, hallways, and this sort of thing. So they always say that unless specified specifically, like a hallway, the ceiling is the same height as the width of the hallway. In terms of a room, the ceiling, again, goes by the width. And this is really useful if you get into issues of flying creatures or blast radiuses of spells and whatnot. The doors are described as, resistant magically from any moisture effects, and they are airtight such that gaseous clouds or forms or whatever can't slip through. Doors are given a standard DC to open with a strength check or to detect a trap. Also, secret doors, again, always given a specific DC. Now, again, you can change these as you will, but, just at the outset, even if it's just for yourself, to know what those dimensions or DCs are. They also say that Halaster can see in the dark. There's no illumination, so now you've got to have, if characters don't have dark vision, they're going to have some kind of light source, whether it's torches or some kind of continual light. Always know this information, just write it down, have it, so that when players ask about it, it's quickly answered. So another feature that they use in this, which I really like, are these Elder Runes. And these are, symbols that are put on a wall or some object or whatever that any character who can use the symbol spell can potentially learn to read and as a ritual even cast. So what I really like is when they list the effect of these runes, you have Boon or Bane. Bane is a bad effect, Boon is good. And the person who, using the symbol spell creates the rune can specify boon or bad, or they can make it random. And these runes are used by Halaster to protect the various gates that he's created. The gates are designed, as we'll see, to move, many more levels between, but you've got to get through them. And he also puts them in different places just as a hazard to bedevil travelers. Perhaps he's watching somewhere in amusement. And then in the appendix, you have a list of these magic runes. Obviously, you could make up your own if you chose. So running into the Elder Runes, it's a total wild card, and it's going to make players very cautious. And this Bane or Boon concept is something I really like. I've used it over the years, looking back where, if you've got, a puzzle that the players have to figure out, or a series of things they have to find, and then they go and make this final thing. It can be either really good or really bad. Maybe they can influence it or have detections or whatever. But the thing about magic being kind of wild magic, you know, there's a force here that you really can't quite control. And of course, if you're creating your own Bane or Boon items, you want to scale the, you know, effects depending on the levels of your players. Or if you're going to have something that's really deadly or really great, you want to warn them. And the final thing I'm going to cover in this, you know, deconstruction, as it were, of the setup of the Dungeon of the Mad Mage are the gates that Hallister uses to facilitate movement between levels that are very far apart, you know, 1st to 10th, for example. They usually require a key or a spell, or you have to know some action in which to open them, and they're open for 1 minute. And they're very often guarded by an Elder Rune. Now, the thing about this is when the Elder Rune, you know, the gate is opened, it's triggered usually on the first person who passes through the gate, but not always. You want to mix this up, sometimes the second, sometimes the third. So the mechanic they use here is once a gate's opened and the rune has been triggered, it's, you know, dissipated unless Hallister throws a symbol spell, which, you know, I would think that he would do this fairly quickly. You decide how much time could the players have to come back through the gate without getting one. But he's going to know when a gate is open. And of course, there are stairs between the levels, conventional stairs and stuff. If you know, but of course, you have to work your way through the dungeon every time if you don't want to use the gates. And the thing about gates is they're a great way to facilitate movement for high-level characters that want to go down to the lowest levels. This thing goes like 23 levels, and you don't want to have to work your way down every time. You figure out where the gates are. You know you're going to have an Elder Rune kind of boon bane effect. But you know, you're going to be high enough probably to withstand it. Because if you're going to have a mega multi-level dungeon, you want to have, whether it's elevators, whether it's gates, or whatever, to facilitate this kind of movement. All right, so that's just the setup of the Dungeon of the Mad Mage. As you can see, it contains all sorts of information that you can use in your own practice of creating dungeons, thinking about the game mechanics, thinking about what it's going to be like to play, what's going to help you have fun. So if you like what you've seen, please subscribe to my channel. I'm always looking for more. Please leave some comments. And of course, my friends, keep playing D&D and tell somebody else about it.